If you have a chance to go through some cultural experience, do it. Because you're never going to regret it. You're never going to regret eating fermented fish because other people in Sweden love it and it's a tradition. You'll never regret dancing around a maypole with these like little 3-year-old girls and with the bishop holding the bishop's hand and just having this cultural experience that you'll never have again in your life possibly. There's so many things that I wish I would have done in Sweden. A lot of the times I was just so involved in getting my chores done and this and that, writing letters to people, that I didn't go out and do as many cultural things as I had wanted to. But then towards the latter half of my mission, I was able to go out and see a Santa Lucia concert with it's the celebration of light. It's I don't know if that's midsummer, if that's on December 13th, the darkest day of the year. But there's so many cultural things that we just need to go out and experience to understand people.
Swedish culture and American culture are very different. In Sweden, instead of going over to your neighbor and complaining about this pile of leaves they left in front of, like between your two houses, in Sweden, instead of going to them and complaining about that, they would write a note, leave it on your door anonymously, or they might just call the police and have them basically talk to you about it. Swedes are not people to be confronted or to confront people. So it's very strange when missionaries come up and say, hey, excuse me, we'd like to talk to you about the church. It's very weird to them because they aren't used to that. And you'll really notice that on buses and trains especially, people will sit there and not speak to each other. See a group of young Swedes sitting together and you think they're friends and they're all sitting there on their phones, you know, not really paying attention to each other, definitely not speaking to each other. And if someone starts speaking pretty loud, oh, you better stop, because that's dangerous. Swedes have this phrase, this word actually called lagom. It basically means not too hot, not too cold. You're just right. And that's kind of a watered down version of what it means, but that's basically how the culture is. You don't want to stick out too much, but you want to stick out enough. Like you can't be too unique, but you still need to be unique. And it's something that's very hard for a lot of people to understand, but you'll catch on as you're there. It's something that's really cool to see, actually. And I've noticed that I've taken a lot of that stuff back with me. I often find myself doing things that are very Swedish, as a lot of people will call it. I didn't notice much of a difference, but now as I look at it and compare how I act to how other people act, I see that I act very much like Swedish people act. I think it's because I've taken a lot of that culture with me from my mission. Swedes are very kind and loyal people. Once you've made friends with a Swedish person, they are your friend. A lot of Swedes don't really have that friend they met the other week, or that friend from college even. A lot of their friends have been their friends since they were born, basically. They were their childhood friends that they met when they were in doggies, in daycare. And they've been friends ever since and haven't really changed who their friends are, who they hang out with. A lot of Swedes don't even know their neighbors. So don't be offended if your Swedish neighbors aren't saying hi to you all the time. It's just because they don't know you. And because they don't know you, they're kind of a hard shell to crack open to get to know you. They don't want to break that barrier because that would be sticking out too much to get to know your neighbors sometimes. It depends on the area that you live in, and it depends on the Swedish person, because you find all ranges of people in all different cultures. But that's typical in Sweden, is for people to be very reserved and harder to become acquainted with. But they are very loyal. They will do anything for you once they know that you really care about them and once they really care about you. I really love Swedish people because of that. Another thing that I really like is how peaceful things are. Sweden's very peaceful. They're kind of pacifistic in their foreign policies, which has really helped them a lot. They haven't had serious wars over in Sweden for the past 200 years. But the people are the same way. They don't like to pick fights. They won't complain about something unless it needs to be brought up.
So the stereotype for what a typical Swede is like is probably true. Most people, but the false stereotype is that they're cold and that they are unwelcoming. And that is a complete lie. They're very reserved and passive people in general. Of course, that's a general, so can't stereotype too much. But they naturally just keep to themselves. If you find a shy person here, that's kind of how they all are like over there. They just really respect each other's own bubbles. And so they're not going to be overly loud to bug other people in public. They're not going to pull attention to themselves. They're pretty unified in that regard. They try to blend in and not stand out as a way to respect one another. And because like the individual is really important to them, like who one person is really important. And so they're not going to try to take away from that by forcing their ideas on someone else. But over the decades, they have become a very, I would say, non-believing country. At least not practicing. If you ask a Swede, do you believe in God? A lot of them will say no. Or they'll say, I believe there's some sort of bigger power in the universe that's controlling everything, but I don't really know who or what that is. Or they'll say, oh, I believe in science kind of thing. But the funny thing is, though, a lot of them are technically a part of a church, particularly the Swedish church, because a couple hundred years ago, it was required. Everyone was part of the Swedish church. Svenska kyrkan is what it's called in Swedish. And so everyone was required to be in it. And so you were like born into it, kind of. And so a lot of people are technically part of a church, but very, very few are actually Christian and believe in Jesus Christ or God. It's always a miracle when we find like, you actually believe in Jesus Christ. I don't have to start from the beginning. It's beautiful. But then they are the most loving people. It can sometimes feel like you're on the outside, like you can't get in, you can't connect with them, but give it time, and next thing you know, they're your most loyal and deepest and truest friends. They take their friends seriously. They don't just make anyone their friend. You can't just sit down next to anyone and say hi, next thing you know, you're best friends. It takes time for them. It takes time for them to warm up, to trust you. But if you get their trust, you'll have no truer or kinder or more loving or giving friend. In general, the Swedes are very, very giving. I think some sort of statistic my Mr. President told us about how they're one of the most charitable countries. Like they give more per capita than just about any other country, including the United States. And the United States, we give a lot, and that's great and commendable, but we often have a tie to it. Like, if we give you this, then we need this. With Sweden, they just give and ask no questions. And not just that, they're incredibly honest. There was some sort of study done about honesty in different countries, and they did it through like business to see honesty through business and stuff. And Sweden was always ranked number 1 or number 2. Finland, between Sweden and Finland, they were always at it. They're very honest, and I guess it's just the Scandinavian mentality because the Norwegians are like that too. And they're very eco-friendly. I hope you don't have a problem with recycling. They recycle everything. They recycle food products. Like there's a brown bag you'll throw away all of your leftover food into. And then they have recycling for paper, recycling for plastic, recycling for glass and metal. And then you have your garbage. Some cities are more strict about it than others. It depends what community you're in. But more often than not, you'll at least be doing recycling, garbage, and then the biodegradable stuff. And I don't recommend letting the biodegradable stuff sit too long under your sink because of paper bags, and paper bags mold. Me and my companions learned that lesson every week. Open the door, oh, it's black fuzzy mold again. So don't recommend doing that. But yeah, because they're an energy like saving country, the green per se. And I think this just stems from tradition in general, but a lot of times they won't turn on the lights until it's absolutely necessary. Like if there's light outside and you got light from the window, they'll probably just use that until it's like legitimate that they probably can't see. And a lot of times they eat dinner in the dark by candlelight. They just have these little candles, just eat it by candlelight. I don't know if that's just because the missionaries went over, so they just did it for the missionaries, or if they did that for every meal, but I'm pretty sure they did because they love candles. There's candles everywhere. They love candles. So, yeah, they're very proud of their country in a way. Not like American pride type of pride, because if you're technically like nationalistic, patriotic, you're considered racist. But they're prideful in their country in the term of they love the nature of their country. They think it's the most amazing thing ever, and they try to preserve it as much as possible. And they probably do have one of the most beautiful lands you will ever see. Fall, winter, summer, spring, all year round. It's breathtaking. And I absolutely loved just going on the trains because you just see the landscape pass by, and it was just, I could just sit there, mouth gaping. Do you just see that? It was just, I even took my camera my last train trip to go to the mission home before I left, and I just recorded the train ride for about 10 minutes. Just because I have to remember this. Don't take it for granted. It's gorgeous there, and it's absolutely breathtaking.